The manifest terminal blinked 3 times before it read my biometrics. Third time every time. 4 years of contractor work across 6 transit hubs, and the machine still did not know what to do with human fingerprints. I waited. The terminal processed. I got my receipt. Doc Vereth 9 orbited a gas giant nobody had named. The kind of place that existed because commerce needed a waypoint, not because anyone chose it. The corridors ran wide enough for Shivik to move comfortably, which meant the ceiling lights sat at the wrong height for my eyes. The air recyclers ran at a temperature calibrated for Oran biology, which meant I had been cold since I stepped off the arrival shuttle 40 minutes ago. Everything was designed for someone else. That was standard. I collected my manifest tablet and moved. The Oran ran the commerce tier. The Shivik ran security. Humans ran errands. That was the breakdown, more or less, and it had been the breakdown for 8 years since the joint trade agreements opened civilian transit to mixed species contractors. 8 years of integration and 3 diplomatic summits. The commemorative brochure from the last summit had a picture of 3 species shaking hands, which was impressive because only one of those species had hands. I had used my copy as packing material. I counted 4 humans in the facility. The cargo loader at Bay 6 with the cracked visor. A tech worker near the communication relays who kept her head down with practiced consistency. An older man by the water dispensers moving like someone who had spent years calibrating the minimum amount of space a person could occupy. And me. 4 of us in a hub of about 300. I went to the cargo bay and started my job. 15 sealed cargo units, Terran origin, destined for helic distribution. My task was to verify the seals, log receipt, and file the transfer documentation. The work was straightforward. Most of my work was straightforward. People hired Terran contractors for the straightforward work because we were cheap, reliable, and did not require atmospheric accommodations. I had made peace with this business model 3 years ago. 14 seals were clean. The 15th had a tag discrepancy, a Terran registry code filed against a helic customs identifier. Minor. Annoying. I filed a query with the dock registry and estimated a 2 to 4 hour wait. I ate half a protein block while I waited. It tasted like regret pressed into a rectangle. The cargo loader from Bay 6 passed me twice in the first hour. Young, maybe 22, with a jaw that had been broken and set not quite right. He moved efficiently. On his second pass, he glanced at my manifest tablet, read the Terran registry codes in about 1 second and kept moving. I noted it and said nothing. A Shivik guard trailed me for 11 minutes when I moved between sectors. He was good at it, keeping 20 meters back, checking wall panels he had already checked. But his footsteps had a particular rhythm, heavier on the right foot, slight drag on the left, and once I noticed it, the 11 minutes were easy to map. He peeled off at the cargo bay entrance. I did not acknowledge him. The discrepancy cleared in 90 minutes. I filed the documentation, logged the timestamp, and stood up. 6 hours until my departure shuttle. I adjusted my collar. The cold air in the cargo bay had been working at my neck for an hour. I pulled the fabric straight without thinking about it, the way your hands do things they have memorized. The transit corridor connecting the cargo tier to the upper levels was full of the ordinary noise of a working dock. Luggage units rolling on tracks. 3 translation systems running simultaneously and disagreeing with each other about a meaningful percentage of the words. Species moving in patterns that almost intersected before routing around each other with practiced indifference. I found the water station, drank, refilled my canteen. I had 6 hours, clean documentation, and a straightforward walk to the departure gate. I started walking it. I was 20 meters past the water station when I heard the footsteps. Not the Shivik guard's rhythm that I had memorized. This was different, heavier overall, wider stride, Oran almost certainly based on the pace and the weight distribution. I did not turn around. I noted the distance, 10 meters closing, The angled direct, not the angled path of someone moving through to somewhere else. There was intention in it. I kept walking. My pace did not change. My shoulders stayed loose. My hands stayed where they were. 8 meters. The cargo bay documentation was filed and complete. My canteen was full. My jacket collar was straight. 5 meters. The footsteps did not veer. 3 meters. I had time to think one clear, flat thought. The kind that arrives when your body has already started running calculations your mind has not quite caught up to. Here we go. 2 meters. He grabbed me by the collar. The grip was from behind and above. Orin height advantage. About a head taller than me, and he pulled. The way you pull something you have decided belongs to you. I had been pulled before. Different context, same physics. My body did what my body had been doing since the Kepler perimeter. It assessed, decided, and moved in that order, in the time it takes most people to register that something is happening. Assessment, his right hand had my collar. His weight was on his forward leg. His wrist was angled slightly outward, an overconfident grip, the kind that assumed the grabbed party would cooperate. Decision, I was not going to cooperate. Move. 1 second. I turned into the grab instead of away from it, which is the thing people never expect. His grip tightened on reflex. That reflex gave me his wrist angle. I took it. 2 seconds. My right hand found his wrist. My left shoulder dropped. I pivoted under his center of gravity, which was high because he was tall, and which was already committed forward because he had been pulling. 3 seconds. He hit the floor. Not gently, not carefully. The floor of Doc Vareth 9's transit corridor was composite panel, rated for heavy cargo loads, and it did not give. He went down from height with the full weight of a 200-kilo Orin merchant and the complete cooperation of gravity, and the sound it made bounced off 3 walls. I stepped back. My tablet had slid 4 meters down the corridor when I moved. I could see it from where I was standing, face down near the wall. My first clear thought was that composite floors were bad for screens, and the dock registry confirmation was still open on it, and I needed that document for my departure filing. I walked to the tablet. I picked it up. I turned it over. The screen was fine. Behind me, the corridor had gone very quiet, not the quiet of an empty space. The quiet of a full space where everyone has stopped moving at the same moment, all at once, as if someone had cut the sound cable to the entire sector. The Orin was still on the floor. Not unconscious, I could hear him breathing, could see his arms moving as he tried to understand what had just happened to him. His 2 associates had been 3 meters behind him when it happened, and were now standing at the same 3 meters, very still, running the math that his position on the floor made complicated. I checked the dock registry confirmation on my tablet. It was intact. Okay then, I said to nobody in particular. The corridor stayed quiet. I had been to enough of these moments to know what the quiet meant. It was not shock, exactly. It was recalibration, the specific silence that descends when a situation resolves in a direction that contradicts everything everyone in the room had predicted. The Orin merchant's name, I would find out later, was Thurek. He was mid-tier commerce, primarily shipping routes between the outer helix systems and the transit hubs on this side of the belt. He had, according to records I did not yet have access to, a history of resolving cargo disputes through physical demonstration. He had been doing this for 6 years across 4 transit hubs and had never encountered a problem with the approach. He was encountering one now. One of his associates said something in Orin that my earpiece translated with a half-second delay as an expression of general alarm. I did not respond to it. The translation software on Vareth 9 ran on the older Helic protocols, which meant it caught about 80% of content and missed most of the emotional register. I had learned to work with that margin. I looked at Thurek. He was sitting up now, slowly. His right hand was moving with the particular careful quality of someone testing whether something still worked correctly. It did not, I suspected, work entirely. The angle I had taken on his wrist was not meant to be gentle. It was meant to be fast and complete, and it had been both. He looked at me. I looked back. There was a version of this moment that involved apology or careful diplomatic language about the misunderstanding and the mutual benefit of moving forward without further incident. I had seen that version deployed by other contractors. I understood the logic behind it. I had never been able to make my face do it. "You grabbed me," I said. My earpiece translated it. The software rendered it in standard commercial Orin, which probably stripped whatever tone I had been going for, but the words themselves were accurate. Thurek said nothing. His associate spoke again. The translation returned, a query regarding my identification and professional affiliation. "Mara Voss," I said. "Terran Contractor Registry, Operational License 774-Kilo, filed and current." I looked back at my tablet. The departure gate for my outbound shuttle was on the upper transit level, through the main commerce corridor, approximately a 12-minute walk. My documentation was filed. My seals were verified. I had nothing else to complete in this section of the dock. I started walking. I was 3 steps away when I heard it. Not Thurek, not his associates. Behind me and to the left, from the direction of Cargo Bay 6. An exhale. One breath, held for the duration of the grab and the 3 seconds and the floor and the silence, and released now, quietly, the way you release something you did not know you were holding onto. I did not turn around. But I heard it. The cargo loader with the cracked visor and the badly set jaw had been in the corridor. He had seen it, and that one exhale contained more information than a full debrief report. It told me he had been waiting to see which way it went. It told me that the version where it went differently was one he had already imagined, and that imagining it had cost him something. It told me he had been carrying that cost from the moment Thurek's footsteps started closing behind me. I kept walking. Behind me I could hear Thurek's associates helping him up, muffled voices, careful movements. Nobody called after me. Nobody moved to intercept. The transit corridor ahead was still full of the normal noise of the dock, luggage tracks, translation systems, bodies routing around each other. The moment behind me was already becoming a story. By the time I reached the upper level, it would have spread to the adjacent sectors. By the time I reached my departure gate, it would have been told at least once with details that had not happened. That was fine. I had my tablet, I had my documentation, the screen had survived. There was a small food vendor near the corridor junction. I stopped and bought something warm, a grain cup of some kind, Shivik style, which meant it was oversalted and slightly thick. But it was warm and I had been cold since the cargo bay, and I was still cold now. I ate it while walking. My collar was straight. Somewhere behind me, on the composite floor of a transit corridor on a dock orbiting a nameless gas giant, a very large merchant was sitting up and learning, one careful movement at a time, exactly what the last 3 seconds had done to his right wrist. I thought about this for roughly 4 steps. Then I finished the grain cup, dropped it in a waste receptacle, and kept moving. The upper transit level was 2 escalator banks away. The escalators on Vareth 9 ran slow, calibrated for the widest passengers, which meant I had about 90 seconds per bank to stand still and do nothing. I used the time to scroll back through my departure documentation and confirm everything was in order. It was. A pair of Shivik in security green were moving toward me from the far end of the upper corridor, walking with the directed purpose of people who had received a notification and were acting on it immediately. I put my tablet in my jacket pocket, straightened my collar, and waited for them to reach me. They were fast. I gave them credit for that. Maravas, the taller one said, Terran contractor. Yes, I said. You need to come with us. I looked at the escalator banks. I looked back at the two Shivak in security green. Okay then, I said. The holding bay smelled like mineral oil and old decisions. It was not a detention cell. Shivak security protocols required a formal distinction between investigative holding and detention, and the room they put me in was technically the former. It had a bench, a water dispenser, and a table with a surface screen that was turned off. The door was not locked, which I discovered about 40 minutes in when I tried it, mostly out of habit. I went back to the bench and sat down. The security lead came in 12 minutes after that. His name was Rithik. He was Shivak, mid-career by the look of him, and he moved with the particular contained energy of someone who had been doing this job long enough to be good at it and recently enough to still care about being good at it. He sat across from me, placed a data reader on the table between us, and did not turn it on yet. Describe what happened, he said. He grabbed me by the collar, I said. I responded, he hit the floor. That is the event. I am asking about context. That is the context. Rithik looked at me for a moment. I looked back. He had steady eyes, dark, clear, and the kind of stillness that costs discipline to maintain. I gave him credit for the stillness. Thurek is a registered commerce operator on this dock, he said. He has documentation indicating a cargo dispute with Helic Distribution, which references Terran contracted cargo currently in Bay 6, Units 1 through 15. Seals verified, documentation filed, transfer complete as of 1 hour and 22 minutes ago. I pulled out my tablet and set it on the table. Registry confirmation is on screen. He looked at it. He did not pick it up. He claims you were involved in the disputed tag filing. The disputed tag was a clerical error in the origin processing chain. It was flagged, queried, cross-referenced, and cleared through standard registry protocol. My name appears on the query submission, not on the original error. I turned the tablet to face him. The timestamp on my query is 1 hour and 50 minutes before the incident. The cleared confirmation is 1 hour before the incident. There is no dispute. Rithik was quiet. He turned on the data reader. You have a Terran military record, he said. I have a discharge certificate, which is a different document. Tutor. Yes. Kepler perimeter. I said nothing. He read for a moment. I watched his face do what faces do when they encounter a service record with a particular density of notation. A small, quiet recalibration. A reassessment of the variables currently in the room. He did it well. Most Shivak security officers I had dealt with did it badly, either overcorrecting toward rigid formality or suddenly becoming very interested in the tabletop. Rithik just read and recalibrated, quietly. The incident took 3 seconds, he said. Yes. From first contact to Thurek on the floor. Approximately. Thurek is 218 kilos. I know. And you? 62, I said. He looked at me. How, he said. It was not quite a question. He was pulling forward. I turned into it instead of against it. That gave me his wrist angle and his center of gravity at the same moment. He is tall, which means his center of gravity is high, and his momentum was already committed. I said this the way I would describe the cargo bay seal verification process. Same tone, same pace. It is straightforward physics. The size differential is less relevant when the larger party's balance is already compromised. Rithik wrote something down. Why did you not disengage before it reached physical contact? I looked at him. He was behind me. He closed from 10 meters in a direct line. He made no verbal contact. The first physical contact was his hand on my collar. You could have stopped, turned around, asked what he wanted. I could have, I said. I did not elaborate. Rithik waited. I did not fill the silence. After about 10 seconds, he accepted this and moved on. Thurek's associates have filed an incident report, he said. The Oran Commerce Council representative for this sector has been notified. This creates a formal review requirement under the Joint Transit Accord, which means I cannot simply log it and close it. I know. That means you stay until the review period is completed. How long? 6 to 18 hours. My outbound shuttle departed in 5 hours and 40 minutes. I looked at the table, I looked at the wall, I looked at the water dispenser. Is there another shuttle to the Helic distribution waypoint in the next 24 hours? There is one at 7:40 tomorrow morning. Fine, I said. Rithik closed his data reader. He stood, moved to leave, and stopped. He turned back. The review will include a formal neurocognitive assessment submission for all parties involved, standard procedure under the Joint Accord. In Thurek's assessment, we will be documenting the physical damage. His wrist is fractured. His shoulder is separated. He paused. In your assessment, he stopped, reorganized the sentence. The standard neurocognitive profile for a party responding to a physical threat includes a fear response index, for context purposes, to establish the proportionality of the response, I said. Yes. You are going to run the scan, and my fear index is going to come back outside normal parameters, I said. I know. It always does. It is in my discharge medical file under the same service record you just read. Rithik said nothing. I was not frightened, I said. I was not angry. I assessed the situation and I responded to it. That is what the scan will show. I looked at the table. That is what it always shows. He left. I sat in the holding bay and listened to dock noise filtering through the wall panels, loading announcements in 3 languages, cargo tracks running, the distant vibration of shuttle engines cycling through pre-flight checks. The door was unlocked. I had been in worse rooms. I had been in rooms where the doors were locked and the light was dim, and the silence had actual weight to it. This room had a water dispenser and ambient dock noise and a bench that was uncomfortable but not punishing. I drank some water. About 30 minutes later, Rithik came back. He put a food packet on the table, standard Shivik issue, gray-wrapped, and slid it toward me without comment. I looked at it. The neurocognitive scan came back, he said. Your fear index at the time of the incident was 0.03. Yes, I said. 0.03 is essentially non-existent. I know. The standard index for a civilian in a physical threat situation is between 14 and 40, he said. I know what the standard index is. He put the data reader down. Your motor precision index, he said slowly, went up during the incident. It usually does. Rithik sat down, not in the formal across-the-table position this time. He sat on the end of the table, which was an informal choice, and he looked at me with the specific expression of someone trying to understand a thing that does not fit inside any of the categories they were given at training. There is a published research paper, he started. Maladaptive Resilience, I said, published by Dr. Sira Cole, University of New Geneva 4 years ago. I have read it. She describes it as an anomalous stress response pattern in a statistically significant subset of Terran military personnel, he said carefully. Decreased fear activation concurrent with increased motor precision under physical threat. She was very polite about it, I said. What would you call it? I looked at the food packet. It contained a grain bar and something that might have been a compressed fruit portion. Tuesday, I said. He looked at me for a long moment. Then, very quietly and clearly against his professional instincts, he almost smiled. Thurek has not formally escalated the complaint, he said. His associates filed the incident report, but Thurek himself has not contacted the Commerce Council representative. He checked his reader. He has instead submitted a single query to the dock registry. What query? He asked for your name. I looked at the wall. My name is in the incident report his associates already filed, I said. Yes, Rithik said, I know. The door stayed unlocked for 40 minutes before I noticed I was simply sitting there and could leave. I finished the grain bar first. Rithik had not formally released me. He had also not locked the door, which under Shivak Joint Accord Protocol constituted an implicit release once the review documentation was filed. The documentation, based on the timestamp I had seen on his reader before he left, had been filed 43 minutes ago. I stood up, dropped the empty food wrapper in the waste receptacle, checked my tablet and walked out. The corridor outside the holding bay was a back-level security passage. Dimmer than the main transit corridors, lower foot traffic, the kind of functional space that exists in every large structure and that nobody moves through unless they are security staff or having a notably bad day. I oriented myself against the dock schematic on my tablet and found the route back to the main transit level. 6 hours had become 2 hours and 40 minutes. The second outbound option was 17 hours away. I had filed my documentation, completed my contracted work, and had nothing left to do on Vareth 9 except get to a gate. I moved. The main transit level in the late commercial cycle was different from the one I had walked through that morning. The cargo traffic had thinned out considerably. The commerce tier vendors had closed their shutters. The three-language announcement system was running at reduced cadence, logging arrivals and departures at longer intervals. The dock had settled into the rhythm of a transit hub between its busy periods, and the corridors had the particular open quality of a place built for more people than were currently in it. I found a functioning water station, drank, refilled my canteen. 3 things happened in the next 2 hours before my shuttle. The first was a Shivak trader whose commerce badge identified him as Vel Oran, who had been near the commerce tier exchange when the incident occurred that morning. I recognized him because he had been one of the bystanders whose faces I had catalogued in the 30 seconds after Thurek hit the floor. He did not speak to me. He was walking in the same general direction I was, and when he saw me ahead of him in the corridor, he adjusted his path. Not dramatically, not the exaggerated step aside of someone trying to communicate something, a quiet, deliberate widening of the gap between his route and mine, the kind of distance you give a thing you have reclassified since the last time you encountered it. I walked past him without acknowledgement. He continued on his route, maintaining the distance. This was, in its way, a communication. I received it and filed it. The second thing happened near the transit level reading area, a small cluster of seats and a data terminal near the main departure board. A researcher was sitting there. She was not Shivak and not Oren. She was Karev, small, light-bodied, with the particular still-focused attention that species brought to everything they examined. She had a data reader in her hands and a badge identifying her as affiliated with the Helic Institute of Interspecies Studies. She looked at me when I came and sat nearby. "Excuse me," she said. Her translation software was good. The Karev typically ran better equipment than most. "You are the Terran contractor involved in the incident this morning." It was not a question. "Yes," I said. "I was present," she said. "I observed the event." She was quiet for a moment with the thoughtful quiet of someone organizing exactly the right words. "I have a question if you are willing." I looked at the departure board. My shuttle was listed, on time. "Go ahead," I said. "Were you afraid?" She asked it the way a careful researcher asks a question, not leading, not loaded, genuinely wanting the data. "No," I said. She made a small note on her reader. "At any point," she said, "before the incident, during it, after it." "No." Another note. May I ask why not? She said. I thought about how to answer honestly, without making it longer than it needed to be. Of what? I said. She looked up from her data reader. There was an Oren merchant, I said. He grabbed me. I had an assessment and a response. There was nothing in that sequence to be afraid of. She was quiet for about 4 seconds. A care of thinking pause. They were fast processors, but they ran everything twice before speaking. That must be a very particular way to move through the world, she said. I looked at the departure board. It is the only way I know, I said. She went back to her data reader. I went back to the departure board. 50 seconds passed. Thank you, she said, without looking up. Sure, I said. Her notes from that exchange would be published, I found out much later, as a supplementary case study in the second edition of Dr. Cole's paper on Terran stress response patterns. She described me, in the careful clinical language of research, as displaying complete situational pre-resolution, a state in which the subject has mapped all probable outcomes before the threat fully develops. She was accurate. She was also, like Dr. Cole, very polite about it. The third thing happened at Gate 7, which was my departure gate, 25 minutes before boarding. A young Oren was sitting near the gate entrance. He was not merchant class. His clothes were dock worker issue, and his badge identified him as cargo handling staff. He was maybe 20 in Oren years, and he had the specific quality of someone who has been carrying a story around all day and has not yet decided what to do with it. He looked at me when I came and sat near the gate. I got out my tablet and opened my departure documentation. You are the one, he said. His translation software was dock grade, slightly rough at the edges. I looked at him. From the corridor, he said, this morning. Yes, I said. He thought about something. His hands were working at the hem of his jacket without him noticing, the way people handle things they have not yet found words for. Were you trained, he said, to fight like that? I looked at my departure documentation. No, I said. He frowned slightly. But you? I was trained to stop, I said. He was quiet. Stop what? He said. I looked at him. He was genuinely asking, not hostile, not testing a point. Just a young dock worker who had been carrying a story around since morning and wanted to understand what it meant. Threats, I said. We were trained to assess them and stop them, quickly, completely. I went back to my tablet. The physical part is just the stopping. He thought about this for long enough that I completed my full, pre-boarding documentation review. Thurek is my uncle, he said. I looked up. The young dock worker, his badge read Owen, a Terran registry name that dock workers had started adopting for commerce-level transit clearance over the past few years, held my look without backing down from it. His eyes were steady, slightly too old for his face. His wrist, he started and stopped and reorganized it. How bad? Fractured, I said. His shoulder was separated as well. Both are treatable. He will be fine. Owen nodded slowly. He grabbed you, he said. Not a defense, not a question. Just a fact being placed carefully on the table between us, the way you set something fragile down. He did, I said. He does that, Owen said. He said it quietly, looking at the gate door. There was something compressed inside those 3 words, a history, a weight, a long and weary familiarity, and I received all of it without asking him to say more. Asking would have required him to say things he did not want to say in a departure lounge, in front of a stranger, 25 minutes before boarding. I let it sit exactly where he had put it. His wrist will heal, I said. He will be back on the commerce routes inside 2 months. Owen nodded again, slowly. He gathered himself and stood a few minutes later when a dock operations announcement called cargo staff back to Bay 4. He collected his things and moved toward the corridor. At the gate door, he paused. My name is Owen, he said. "Mara," I said. He left. I sat at gate 7 and watched the departure board move toward boarding time. A boarding agent came and checked my documents. She scanned them, returned my tablet, and moved on to the next passenger. The gate opened at the correct time. I boarded. Somewhere behind me, behind the gate and the transit corridors and the reading area and the back-level security passage and the holding bay with its unlocked door, the cargo loader from Bay 6, the one with the cracked visor and the badly set jaw, was still working his shift. I did not know his name. I knew his exhale. I knew exactly what it weighed. Some things you know without needing them explained. I found my berth and sat down. The shuttle was a mid-tier transit vessel, helicopter-rated, running the route between Verath 9 and the distribution waypoint at the outer belt margin. 42 passenger berths, all economy. The berths were designed for Oran proportions, which meant they were slightly too wide and slightly too tall, and the overhead luggage shelf sat at a height that required me to step on the seat frame to reach it. I stowed my bag. Sat down. The viewport showed the dock exterior, loading arms, corridor bridges, the slow drift of cargo containers being moved between bays by remote tug. Everything was composite metal and transit-grade lighting, and the particular deep amber orange of the gas giant sitting at the edge of visual range, massive and unhurried, doing what it had always done. Nobody sat next to me. The berth beside mine stayed empty. The shuttle ran its pre-flight checks. The boarding announcement played in 4 languages. One of the translation renderings used a past tense construction that technically implied the passengers were already dead, a quirk in the older Helix software that had been documented, reported, and not corrected for 2 years running. I closed my eyes. Not to sleep, to run a quiet inventory. I had been running quiet inventories since the Kepler perimeter, a methodical pass through the events of the day, filing each piece in the correct category. Manifest delivered, seals verified, documentation filed, cargo dispute cleared, incident resolved, review completed, departure on time, second shuttle. One Oran merchant with a fractured wrist and a separated shoulder. One holding bay with an unlocked door. One Carev researcher with good equipment and honest questions. One young dock worker named Owen, whose uncle had a long habit and whose eyes were too old for his face. One exhale in a corridor. I opened my eyes. The gas giant filled the left side of the viewport now, larger as the shuttle cleared the dock arm and began its transit approach. It was enormous in the specific way that gas giants are enormous, not dramatically, not in a way that asked for a reaction, simply in the way of things that have been enormous for so long that enormousness is just what they are. The deep amber cloud bands ran in long horizontal lines that had been running for longer than any civilization in this sector had existed. My notification queue blinked twice. I pulled out my tablet. The first notification was from Shivik Dock Authority, Verath 9, marked as Review Resolution. I opened it. The language was formal and dry, the specific dry of bureaucratic documents written to convey information without conveying opinion, which was a form of communication I had always respected for its honesty about what it was. The incident report filed by Thurex Associates had been formally reviewed under Joint Transit Accord Protocol. The review was complete. The incident had been classified under the Accord's self-response provision, which covered situations in which a party responds to unprovoked physical contact initiated by the other party. The classification required no further action from me. The incident was logged and closed. Attached to the resolution was a secondary document. It was a complaint withdrawal, filed not by the associates but by Thurek himself, submitted 3 hours after the incident through his personal commerce account, with supporting text in the statement field. The translation software rendered it as, "Matter is concluded, no further action required." The supporting statement contained more. I read through it twice to make sure I was parsing it correctly through the dock-grade software. What it said, as accurately as the translation could render it, was something close to, "The fault was mine alone." The response was proportionate. "I withdraw all complaint filed in connection with this incident, on behalf of myself and any associated parties." I looked at this for a while. Thurek had not been required to file a withdrawal. The incident was closed regardless, under the self-response provision. The review was complete. There had been no obligation on his part to do anything except let the process finalize. He had filed it anyway. He had filed it personally, not through his associates, and he had written the supporting statement himself. I thought about Owen's voice in the departure lounge. The quiet wait in 3 words, "He does that." Thurek had done it for 6 years across 4 transit hubs and had never hit the floor before. He had hit the floor today, and had spent part of his afternoon, from a dock medical bay with a fractured wrist and a separated shoulder, filing a personal withdrawal with a handwritten statement. People were more complicated than the stories they moved through the world carrying. I filed the resolution in my contractor documentation archive. The second notification was from the Terran Contractors Guild, marked as Standard Bulletin, Low Priority. I almost closed it without reading. I opened it instead. The bulletin was a general memo to all active contractors in mixed-species transit zones. "Third incident this quarter," it said. 3 separate Terran contractors at 3 separate transit hubs had each responded to unprovoked physical contact from dominant-class species. All 3 incidents had resolved without lasting harm to the Terran contractor. The Guild was requesting that members document these encounters using the standard incident log template for the purposes of ongoing interspecies conduct calibration. Calibration. I looked out at the gas giant. Calibration was a very careful word for what was actually being tracked. What the Guild was tracking, what Rithik had been running numbers on in the holding bay, what Dr. Cole had published about 4 years ago, what the Carev researcher had been nodding in her reader near the departure board, was the gap between what the rest of the galaxy expected when they made physical contact with a human and what actually happened. The gap was not small. I did not know if it had always been this size or if the Kepler perimeter had made it this size. I had a theory, but theories about your own nervous system were the least reliable kind. What I had were scan results, discharge records, and 4 years of contractor log entries that told a consistent story without ever naming what the story was about. There is a specific way humans move through hostile spaces that does not come from aggression. It does not come from confidence, exactly, either. It comes from something that does not translate cleanly into any of the dominant species languages I had worked with, partly because most of those languages had never needed a word for it. The closest I had come to explaining it to a non-human was to a Shivik medical officer at the discharge station after my second tour. She had looked at my scan results and asked, with careful professional courtesy, how I was managing to function normally with a stress-response architecture she described as severely atypical. I had thought about it. "I know what I can do," I had said. She had written that down. I did not know what she filed it under. What I meant, what I had always meant, without elaborating then or since, was something the Kepler perimeter had clarified, not taught. The perimeter had not taught me anything I had not already carried. What it did was remove all the uncertainty around what that thing was. To tour in the hardest contested sector in the current galactic configuration. Equipment failures at critical intervals. The specific education of coming back from operations without people who had been standing next to me when we went out. After all of that, an Oran merchant in a transit corridor was not a threat. He was a problem with a known solution. The solution had taken 3 seconds. The shuttle cleared the dock entirely now. The gas giant filled more of the viewport. those deep amber bands running their ancient horizontal circuits across a surface larger than anything the commerce tiers and transit hubs and diplomatic brochures of this sector had ever managed to build. I opened my contractor log. This was the standard document, the one the Guild wanted all contractors to maintain, the daily record of events relevant to ongoing contracted work. I had kept it consistently for 4 years. It was not a journal. It was not a space for reflection or processing. It was a record, accurate and brief, and I kept it the way I kept my canteen, as a tool that needed to work when you needed it. I opened a new entry. I typed the date, the doc identifier, the contract reference number. I typed Verath 9, doc incident, collar grab 1 Orin merchant identified as Thurek commerce operator Helic outer route, resolved in 3 seconds. Merchant sustained fractured wrist and separated shoulder, both treatable, no lasting harm. No injury to contractor. Manifest delivery completed prior to incident. All documentation filed and confirmed. Complaint filed by merchant associates, subsequently withdrawn by merchant personally. Review resolution received. Self-response classification. No further action required. Departure delayed to second outbound shuttle, 17 hours. I paused. Then I typed, tablet undamaged. I looked at this entry for a moment. Then I closed the log, put my tablet in my jacket pocket, and looked out the viewport. The gas giant was falling behind now as the shuttle accelerated fully into its transit lane. The great amber bands were narrowing in the viewport, the planet pulling back into the long dark the way all large things eventually pull back, leaving everything smaller in their wake without meaning to. I pulled my jacket over me as a blanket, because the Helic temperature settings were calibrated for Orin biology, and the cabin was cold, and I was tired of being cold. My collar was straight. Somewhere behind me, on a dock orbiting a gas giant nobody had named, 300 beings were updating one variable in a very old equation. The variable was small. The update would take a long time to move through all the systems it needed to move through. It would move through Commerce Council reports and security review archives, and the supplementary notes of a CAREV researcher, and the second edition of a published paper, and the quiet memory of one young dock worker with steady eyes. That was how updates worked. You could not rush the math. You could only create the conditions and let the math follow where it had to follow. The conditions had been created in 3 seconds on a composite floor. The math would take years. That was fine. I was not in a hurry. I was a contractor with a clean manifest, a filed log entry, and a grain cup wrapper in my jacket pocket, on a shuttle heading toward a distribution waypoint in the outer belt where there were 14 more cargo units to verify, and a terminal that would blink 3 times before it read my biometrics correctly. The berth was slightly too wide, the shelf was slightly too tall, the temperature was calibrated for someone else. I closed my eyes. The shuttle ran on. Outside, the galaxy turned a small, soft-looking thing over in its mind, the way it had been turning it over since the first Terran contractor stepped off the first arrival shuttle at the first mixed-species transit hub and smiled pleasantly at the customs officer and waited to be underestimated. The galaxy was patient. So was the math. So for that matter was I. Not my problem anymore. The gas giant fell away. The dark came up around the shuttle, clean and deep and full of distance, and somewhere in that distance, a waypoint was waiting with cargo units, and a terminal that required 3 attempts and work that needed doing, and that was enough. That was always enough.